Welcome back to Royal Vault UK, where we uncover the hidden stories, quiet heartbreaks, and untold secrets behind the British crown. Tonight, we step away from the balcony, the carriages, and the carefully choreographed ceremonies, and walk into a far more private world. Behind the polished image of a steadfast monarch, Queen Elizabeth lived a second life that was rarely acknowledged in public, but felt deeply in private. She was not only the longest reigning sovereign in British history, she was also a mother of 4 very different children, each carrying their own wounds, expectations, and disappointments. In public, the Queen appeared composed, unshakable, almost carved from duty itself. She waved, she smiled, she remained calm in the face of crisis. But inside Buckingham Palace, there were nights when the crown offered little comfort. There were conversations that ended in silence, phone calls that felt unbearably cold, and headlines that cut straight through the armor of monarchy and into the heart of a mother. Over the decades, her relationship with King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward was tested by divorce, scandal, resentment, and the heavy weight of royal expectation. Some of the deepest wounds did not come from distant politicians or critical newspapers, but from within her own family. A son who felt misunderstood, a daughter who chose duty over sentiment, a younger generation who rejected the life she had spent her entire reign defending. Tonight, we gently open that locked door and explore the side of Queen Elizabeth that the cameras were never meant to see. From moments of quiet regret to public crises that left her privately devastated, this is the story of her most painful experiences as a mother, finally brought into the light from within the walls of Buckingham Palace. From the moment she ascended the throne as a young woman, Queen Elizabeth faced a reality that very few could ever imagine. She did not inherit a simple role. She inherited a life in which duty came before every instinct of the heart. And while most mothers are allowed to learn and grow through their early mistakes, she was expected to be flawless from the beginning. Every decision was watched. Every expression was analyzed. Even the smallest misunderstanding within her family risked becoming headline material across the world. In those early years of her reign, the Queen was surrounded by the pressures of rebuilding a nation still carrying the scars of war. She traveled constantly. She received endless delegations. She became the face of continuity for a country searching for stability. But while the monarchy needed her, her young children often saw only the side of her that belonged to the public. The tender, unhurried moments that many mothers take for granted were rare luxuries for her. Within palace walls, nannies, tutors, and courtiers filled the daily roles she longed to play. Her firstborn, Charles, grew up under the immense shadow of an institution that shaped every hour of his life. Sensitive, thoughtful, and yearning for warmth, he often struggled with the formal expectations placed on him. His sister, Anne, so different in temperament, embraced discipline and structure, excelling where Charles felt confined. Their contrasting personalities created an unspoken tension that the Queen, torn between maternal instinct and royal obligation, could not always mend. As the years passed, her younger sons, Andrew and Edward, were raised in a palace already accustomed to scrutiny. The world had changed. The monarchy had changed. And the relationship between the Queen and her children evolved under the weight of public expectation and private misunderstandings. She tried to balance her devotion to duty with the demands of motherhood, but the crown often required more from her than any mother should have to give. Behind closed doors, she faced a truth that many parents confront, but few will admit. Her children needed different things from her, and she did not always know how to give them those things. Her reign asked for composure, but motherhood asked for vulnerability. She could not always be both. As the decades unfolded, tensions grew. Bonds were tested, and the quiet failures of communication within the family would eventually lead to some of the most painful moments of her life. Moments born not from rebellion against the crown, but from the struggles of a mother who desperately wished to protect her children, yet often had to stand back and watch their lives unravel in front of the entire world. The most painful moments in Queen Elizabeth's life as a mother were not sudden explosions of conflict, but slow, quiet fractures that deepened over many decades. Each child brought a unique struggle, and the Queen, bound by duty, often found herself standing on the edge of their lives, unable to intervene in the way her heart wished she could. These were the moments that left lasting marks on her reign and on her soul. The tension with her eldest son, Charles, began early. He was a boy of gentle temperament, introspective and deeply emotional. What he needed was reassurance, warmth, long conversations in quiet rooms. But the Queen's world was built on schedules, ceremonies, and the unspoken rule that a monarch must never appear vulnerable. Charles often felt overshadowed not only by the institution, but also by the steadfastness of his father Philip, whose expectations were rooted in discipline and resilience. When Charles struggled at school, when he felt misunderstood by his parents, the Queen watched from a careful distance. She offered love, but it was filtered through the walls of monarchy. And as he grew older, their relationship bore the weight of years of unspoken disappointment and missed intimacy. Then came the moment that nearly broke her. The collapse of Charles's marriage to Diana was not simply a political embarrassment. It was a deeply personal tragedy. She saw a young woman desperate for affection and understanding, and she saw her son equally lost in a marriage that had been shaped by expectation rather than choice. With every argument that became public, with every newspaper that dissected their marriage, the Queen felt a growing ache she could not silence. She could not save Charles from the scrutiny. She could not save Diana from heartbreak. And she could not save her grandchildren from lifelong memories shaped by chaos. She stood in the center of a storm, powerless to protect the people she loved most. Her daughter Anne rarely caused public drama, yet their relationship carried its own quiet conflict. Anne was fiercely independent, unafraid to challenge tradition. She understood her mother's vision for the monarchy, but she often chose her own path. The Queen admired her strength, but she also felt the sting of distance. Anne was the child who did not need her, the child who learned early to stand alone. And while independence is often celebrated, for a mother it can feel like a rejection. Anne's sense of duty mirrored the Queen's, but their emotional worlds rarely touched. That distance, though peaceful on the surface, left a lasting bruise. With Andrew, the pain was of a different nature. He had once been her charming, confident son, the one she believed would carry the monarchy's image into a modern age. But as scandals began to accumulate around him, the Queen found herself in an impossible position. She could not openly defend him without risking the monarchy's credibility, and she could not condemn him without breaking her own heart. She watched his reputation crumble, watched the public turn against him, and endured the humiliation of seeing her family dragged into controversy. The decision to slowly remove him from royal life was one of the hardest choices she ever made, not as a monarch, but as a mother who had to accept that she could no longer shield her child from consequences. Edward, the youngest, brought a different kind of sorrow. He yearned for a life beyond the palace walls, a world of creativity, production, and independence. His early attempts to build a career outside the institution were met with criticism, ridicule, and a level of scrutiny that suffocated him. The Queen watched him retreat, watched him doubt himself, and watched him abandon dreams he once held tightly. For a mother, seeing a child lose confidence is a quiet agony, the kind that lingers long after the moment has passed. But perhaps the deepest heartbreak of all came not from any single child, but from the realization that the crown had shaped each of their lives in ways she could not undo. Their resentments, their insecurities, their failures, and their public humiliations were, in some way, born from the same source, a mother who could never fully be theirs. She loved them deeply, but her first loyalty was to a country, a realm, and a promise she had made when she was barely more than a girl. The personal cost of that promise was carried by all five of them. Inside Buckingham Palace, there were moments when the Queen sat alone, reading reports, watching interviews, listening to public commentary, and feeling the weight of motherhood press heavily on her. Not with anger, but with sorrow. She had given her life to the crown, but in doing so, she had asked her children to share in a sacrifice they had never chosen. That was her greatest conflict, and the pain of it followed her until her final days. In the years that followed these private storms, Queen Elizabeth carried their weight with the same quiet endurance that defined her entire reign. Yet the aftermath of these painful episodes left deep impressions on both the monarchy and her own understanding of motherhood. She learned, often through sorrow, that the crown did not simply shape her life. It shaped the lives of her children in ways neither she nor they could control. And the consequences of that truth rippled far beyond the palace gates. With Charles, The emotional distance of his early years never fully disappeared. But as he grew older, especially after the loss of Diana, he began to understand the impossible position his mother had lived with. He came to see that her restraint had not been indifference, but the only language her life had ever taught her. Slowly, they found a new rhythm, one shaped by empathy instead of expectation. There were still moments of tension, still echoes of misunderstandings from decades earlier, but there was also a gentleness between them that had been absent in their youth. The Queen, watching Charles evolve into a man of conviction and vulnerability, carried a quiet relief that their relationship had finally softened. Anne, ever the stoic daughter, became one of the Queen's most reliable sources of strength. Their emotional distance remained, but it no longer felt like a wound. Instead, it became a kind of unspoken understanding between two women shaped by the same discipline. Anne respected the crown as her mother had, and the Queen, in return, relied on Anne's unwavering loyalty in moments when the monarchy trembled. Their bond was less of tenderness and more of shared purpose. It was not what the Queen had dreamed motherhood would be, but it was a form of closeness that she came to cherish. Andrew's scandal cast a far darker shadow. For the monarchy, it was a crisis of trust. For the Queen, it was a personal devastation. She had to confront the painful truth that love for a child could not undo the consequences of that child's actions. The decision to withdraw Andrew from public duties marked one of the rare moments when her heart and her duty pulled violently in opposite directions. But in choosing the stability of the monarchy, she carried the guilt of knowing how deeply the choice wounded him. Public opinion demanded clarity, but her maternal instinct longed to protect him. That inner conflict never fully healed. It remained a silent grief, known only to those closest to her. Edward's struggles brought another kind of reflection. Seeing her youngest son grapple with identity and purpose forced the Queen to question the world she had created for all of them. She wondered in quiet moments whether the rigid expectations of the monarchy had clipped their wings before they ever learned how to fly. Yet she watched Edward slowly rebuild himself, forging a quiet, stable role within the royal family. His journey taught her that resilience can grow even in the deepest shade. It eased her heart to see him find peace, even if it came later than he had hoped. But beyond the individual stories, there was a larger lesson that emerged from these hardships. The Queen came to see that the greatest cost of her reign was not political, nor constitutional, nor historical. It was personal. Her children had paid a price for her devotion to the crown, and though she never expressed regret, those who knew her sensed that she carried a profound awareness of that sacrifice. It shaped her decisions in her final decades, influencing how she supported William and Catherine, how she navigated the turbulence with Harry and Meghan, and how she prepared the monarchy for a future she would not witness. Publicly, she remained steady, composed, unshaken. Privately, she reflected often on the delicate balance between love and duty. She understood that the monarchy demanded strength, but motherhood required softness, and for her, the two rarely coexisted. Her children had grown into adults who respected her deeply, but they had also lived through the consequences of her always choosing the realm first. In the quiet rooms of her private residences, that truth lingered like a shadow. Yet, the monarchy endured, and her family, despite fractures and failures, endured with it. The Queen's ability to bear these hardships without bitterness became one of the most defining traits of her later years. She learned that even heartbreak can shape legacy. And in her case, it shaped a monarchy that had weathered countless storms, both public and deeply personal. In the final years of her life, Queen Elizabeth found herself reflecting more deeply on the journey she had taken as both monarch and mother. She had spent more than 7 decades carrying the weight of a nation, yet it was the quieter burdens, the ones whispered rather than spoken, that stayed with her. The crown required unwavering stability, but the heart of a mother lives in moments of uncertainty, worry, and hope. And she had carried all of these with a discipline the world would never fully understand. There were times, in the stillness of her private rooms, when she allowed herself to feel the full measure of what had passed, the triumphs and the failures, the reconciliations and the unresolved wounds. She looked upon her children as adults, shaped not only by their own choices, but by the inescapable structure of the life she had given them. They were bound to a destiny that none of them had chosen. a destiny that demanded sacrifice, not just from her, but from each of them in their own way. Yet despite the distance, the misunderstandings, and the grief that accompanied their lives, there remained an unbreakable thread that held them together. It was a thread woven not from affection alone, but from endurance, tradition, and a shared understanding of duty. She had raised them in a world defined by expectations, and though they had stumbled, struggled, and sometimes fallen, they remained part of a legacy that stretched far beyond any single life. As the Queen grew older, she began to see her story not as a tale of royal perfection, but as the journey of a woman who carried two identities that often collided. The world remembered her as a sovereign, but her most profound memories were shaped by motherhood. The nights of worry, the disappointments she never voiced, the pride she seldom expressed publicly, but felt deeply nonetheless. She understood that the crown had cost her many things, but it had never taken her love for her children. That love, though quietly expressed, remained constant until her final breath. In those last years, she relied heavily on the presence of Charles, the steadiness of Anne, the quieter support of Edward, and the complicated bond she continued to navigate with Andrew. She watched her grandchildren grow into adults forging their own paths, some within the monarchy, others beyond its reach. And as she saw her family evolve, she understood that their struggles, like her own, were part of a broader story that would continue long after she was gone. When her reign came to an end, the world mourned a monarch. But behind the public expressions of grief, her family mourned something far more personal. They mourned a mother who had given all she could, even when the weight of her responsibilities left little space for the softness she wished she could have offered more freely. Her life was a testament to duty, but her quiet heartbreaks revealed a humanity that made her reign all the more profound. And so, her story does not end with the passing of a queen. It continues in the lives of her children and in the legacy they carry, shaped by her strength, tempered by her sacrifices, and illuminated by the quiet love she held for them. The halls of Buckingham Palace remember her not only as a sovereign, but as a mother whose deepest pains, once hidden, now bring a deeper understanding of the woman behind the crown.